All right, so now that we have all of these styles, and we're pretty close to what we have in the design, about as close as we're going to get, let's move these styles over to our code. So I'm going to jump back to our editor. So now that we've figured out our styling, where exactly do we put it? This is the first time where we're going to have to think hard about how we apply a style. We can't set all H2s to this style because we already have some other H2s that we need to be styled a different way. We can't just slap on a class called different because we already have an H2 tag that uses that class. So now that there's 3 kinds of H2s that we need, what do? We could go with generic names like different, or in this case it might be variation, so variation 1, variation 2, variation 3. But that's not very descriptive. It doesn't quite explain what the role of this heading is. Right now, being descriptive with class names might not seem that important, but eventually class names will tell us a lot about the structure of our content, and they'll also make it clear when we should use certain classes and when we shouldn't. If we start out using generic names like variation 1 and variation 2, eventually we'll have variation 100 or 200. And when we look at the styles, we won't know exactly in what context those styles are supposed to apply. That will cause us some pretty serious headaches later on when we try to figure out how to refactor our CSS. In a lot of your first projects, CSS is going to start to get out of control. Imagine dealing with several hundred selectors. At some point, we'll have selectors that we're no longer using, and it will be impossible to tell what we can remove and where we should edit existing classes if they have generic names. So at this point, we're going to opt out of using generic names altogether. So how would we describe this? To come up with a good name, let's look at the design. So here we have our heading, and we know that it's a heading for a slider. So we could create a class that's some variation on slider heading. But is it possible that we would use the same style in another context? Say any default heading 2 that's on some negative color scheme? Well, we don't know for sure. And even though it's good to think about the possible future uses of our styles, if there's a question, then it's good to default to what we know. So we do know that this heading is going to be used on a slider. So let's use the class slider heading. I'm going to go back to our editor and let's add a class in here called slider heading. And now we can add that selector up here in our styles. This editor lets me select classes that have been used in our HTML content. I'll select slider heading. I'll create a starting and ending bracket, and then I'll go back to Chrome and copy all of these styles, jump back over to our editor and paste it in. Let's save this, go back to the browser and refresh. Okay, now we see our styles being added to this slider heading selector.